Hello again, Sandwich. I'm Greg Anderson. Each election cycle or season, I like to contribute to our community and bring you these educational and informational discussions with the candidates. Today, we're talking about the Sandwich Planning Board, and my guest is Bob King. He is the incumbent, and he is one of three that are running for 2 seats. He's next on Meet the Candidates. I am so thrilled to have Bob King as my guest today. Bob, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Your home looks beautiful, even in this small little box.
Thank you.
So let me ask you right off the top. I know we're going to talk about you running for, would be your third
Yes.
term, and they're 3 years each.
Yes.
But before we get into that, tell me how life has been. COVID, everybody healthy, everyone okay?
Yeah, well, so far, and thank God, everyone in our world is healthy.
Yeah.
We are everyone that works with us. So we learned on Sunday night that the following Tuesday our restaurant would be going from full service to takeout only.
Yeah.
And so we basically had one day to shift gears that Monday. And most of our staff we had to let go of because we just didn't need anywhere near the number of people that we had been operating with.
Yeah.
And we just sort of played it by ear. And I think after the first couple of weeks, we are definitely into a new routine and new, ways of doing things. And it's working out. It's working out okay. We're plugging along, and but it's just a different world. It's so different.
How are you feeling about the summer? Essentially.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I mean, one of the things that we're really grateful for, in fact, the Board of Health touched on it today, is that, outdoor tables are really much preferred. You've got the UV rays essentially, killing any virus if it's present on the, furniture, as well as, being able to better distance. So we're very lucky in that regard because a lot of our seating is outdoors. And we've already distanced the tables in the event that somebody ends up sitting down. So that's going to work out pretty well for us. Of course, we'll still become weather dependent.
I know.
But I don't know. It's interesting because right now the governor isn't allowing anyone to rent a motel room or bed and breakfast or Airbnb. So will tourists become is a big question. Big question.
The process of you running for a third term, there are 2 seats open. One person is stepping away. You are the incumbent, hoping for another 3 years, and there are 3 of you that are running. Talk to me a little bit about what it is like to be an incumbent, and dovetail this, if you will, to what are the projects that you and this group have already started that you probably want to see through?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what's interesting is, we've never had this. We have to usually go out and recruit members for the board. In fact, I think the last 3 election cycles, we didn't actually have a full slate of candidates. And for example, Sarah Regan agreed to serve another term at the last election because nobody had stepped up. And so we were very lucky. Sarah has been a great asset for me personally in terms of just being somebody I can turn to and ask about, things. And that's something that's interesting about my own candidacy is I was thinking today, I'm going to be the longest serving member on that board if I'm reelected. And I still feel like something of a beginner. So so that's an interesting thing. So it's a little bit of a phenomena that we have a race at all. And there are some things on the horizon. We were just, in fact, the meeting that was called off when the whole COVID-19 situation hit was to begin the hearing process for an accessory use dwelling, which is basically an intent to allow people to have apartments in their home, or maybe convert a garage into an apartment, given that their lot would be big enough. There's a whole set of criteria, but we go through the hearing process. We have at least 2 hearings. We have to feel that everybody's been heard. Um, Sometimes if you have something like that and nobody shows up, then you might have one or two meetings and you realize, well, this isn't a controversial thing. We can just go to town meeting and get it voted on. So,
Yeah.
um, but we usually have at least two hearings on something like this. And it's kind of a big deal. I think that, people should have a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we've hammered it together in a way that is very similar to the way, we had the benefit of the experience of other towns on the Cape doing this. So I think it's going to be a good bylaw. I think one of the things that's also interesting and one of the biggest misconceptions about the planning board sometimes is that people in town will, I remember I posted something on social media about one of these hearings and somebody immediately came on and said, oh, so you're going to basically shove this new law down our throats. Is that what you're telling me? And the irony is that that's not how it works.
Yeah.
We don't pass any zoning bylaws at our board. All we do is really recommend them to the Board of Selectmen to be put onto the town meeting articles, town meeting articles. And then 2/3 of all of the town's voters have to agree that that's a good zoning bylaw in order for it to pass as law. So I think a lot of times, especially on social media, you'll see people saying the town this, the town that. The town are people are the voters. Virtually no monetary expenditure and certainly no zoning bylaw can occur and be put on the books in town without, as in this case, 2/3 of the voters, in fact, have to vote in favor of the zoning bylaw.
So tell me about the accessibility dwelling. Is that likely to face any opposition? Does that have
Yeah,
controversy to it?
I think that part of it is like I had a lot of second thoughts, given that I live in a street in the village that's actually adjacent to homes that have multiple apartments in them.
Mhm.
So I've had the experience of what is it like to have apartments occupied by uh, people where the owner is not present, and then what it's like when that building or one of those apartments is occupied by the owner, and it's a world of difference. So that was a big concern for me. It was like, I sort of scratched my head at first and thought, well, wait a minute, we're going to be turning all these houses into multiple units and multiple apartment houses. And I think one of the big things is that you have to live in the house. You can't, even if you set up the accessory dwelling unit within your house and you go to sell your house, a developer can't buy it and say, great, I have 2 rental units here. He has
Got
to
it.
move into that house and live in that house in order to rent out that accessory dwelling. So it's really meant for older people. It's called aging in place. Older people who don't want to leave their home but realize, well, we can reconfigure this building in a different way and actually have a 1-bedroom apartment as well as enough space to remain here ourselves.
Yeah.
And so they can rent that apartment out and maybe pay their taxes, maybe a little bit, maybe their taxes and their utilities, who knows, and live out the rest of their lives in the home that
Yeah.
they raise their families in and continue to live in.
So when we talk about the pandemic and we talk about the social distancing, how does the planning board, how are you getting business done right now? And
Well, fortunately, we have not had, in fact, Ralph was on the COVID-19 pandemic townie, update today that I watched, and said that, we really haven't had any applications that are really, burning, that all of them, in fact, have said, we understand, we can wait. We only, that's one of the things about the planning board is oftentimes, I would say probably, I don't know, maybe 30% of the time, we actually have no agenda, so we don't have a meeting. And
really?
so it's not that every single month, twice a month, there's something that comes up that has to be taken care of. If there
Right.
is, we're there to do it. But a lot of times, we make that call on a Friday prior to the Tuesday of the meeting. If we
Yeah.
haven't had anybody come in, we'll call that Tuesday's meeting off.
Yeah.
Because you also have to advertise a lot
Right.
sometimes for things as well.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's not always 100, that you're meeting every single
Yeah.
time.
So you are You are well known in town.
Mhm.
You got Cafe Chew. You've got you're at every event. You're a big supporter, big champion of this community. You've got the chocolate dipped brownie bomb. Uh, I mean, come on, that is putting
Yeah.
you
Well, somebody said to me, chocolate is such a it's fantasy that you do it. Invent
exactly.
something chocolate, and they were right.
So so being somebody who is so involved, does that help you when you're sitting on a town board such as this, or does it hinder? Neither.
For me, it hasn't made any difference because um, first of all, you really wouldn't discuss, like if you said to me, Bob, I'm going to be coming to the planning board because I live on a scenic road and I want to remove a tree. I might discuss with you what are the parameters around which you are allowed to remove a majestic shade tree on a scenic road, but I wouldn't discuss yours.
Right. Got it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so I could talk about the ruling,
Yeah.
what you could expect, but I really wouldn't get into like what's your situation, what's your circumstance.
Right.
We sort of understand on the board that if that were to happen, we really should recuse ourselves later
Yeah.
from sort of doing it. So yeah, we don't really pursue things. I've actually never have been approached by anybody who knows that they're going to have something pending before the planning board and pulled me aside to say, hey, can we talk about this?
Right.
Never happened. um, and that's one of the things that's a little bit funny too is that power thing there. It's really we're more of a, in a sense, the checks and balance for
Yeah.
seeing that you maybe as an applicant are getting your fair shake, that if it's an engineering issue, you're putting in a road, we're not going to make those calls. We're going to look to
Right.
the professional staff in town to ask if you have conformed to everything you need to.
Yeah. So Ralph Fataco is 3 years into his new
uh,
position, two, four, something along those lines.
I think he's been there for all of the last term that I served.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
So not specifically about Ralph, though I don't want to edit you. How
Mm.
is the planning department in
I think
town?
they're great. I think that, they're very thorough, very professional. It's like I said, a lot of what you're doing is you're really just referring back to like what are the rules and the regulations. You approach Ralph, with this idea for, wanting to say buy the wing school.
Mhm.
You're a developer and you come
How
forward
did
and
you
say,
know?
right, I want to buy the wings. You put out an RFP and I'm interested. You know, that would be, something that, we as a board actually changed all of the uses for the wing school so that when that person might approach the planning department, they could say, these are all of the things, if you were to want to buy that piece of real estate, you could do with it.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff gets, and so the planning department is really referring back to those things, a lot of, state regulations. I think that the planning department is pro-user friendly. I think that, they want to help in any way that they can. And I don't think that there's, a negative, predisposition towards anything,
Yeah.
really. I think they're very fair-minded.
You mentioned the wing school. I did an interview with Heather and Ralph right before the pandemic in the run up to what would have been the special town meeting. What is your take on that, on the proposal that's before the town?
Well, I went to almost every outreach meeting that the Board of Selectmen had for townsfolk to give their input. What would you like to see happen to the wing school? And um, absolutely, the number one thing that came up was, wouldn't it be great if a company like the company that bought the Cody School in Bourne and the school down in South Yarmouth came along and wanted to do affordable housing, senior housing with wing school?
Hmm.
That was absolutely, one of the things. An entertainment venue of some kind, mixed use housing and commercial. I mean, we basically ultimately at the planning board um, put that to the voters, and the voters agreed on almost every use that I can't think of, that came out of those outreach meetings that people, came forward to say, we think this would be a good idea. This might be a good idea. Why don't we try this? So we gave, to really have as wide a group of options as possible for any future developer, we really, let them, you know, essentially use it for almost anything that, you
Yeah.
could think of that would be compatible with Wing School. And lo and behold, the one that came up was the very company who did the Cody School and the
Yeah.
school in South Yarmouth, who want to come in, save the old original part of the school, which was something that was important to a lot of people, um, and build affordable housing for seniors. And it's just, I am very much in favor of it, only because I know what the town faces if we don't unload that school. And it
How
is,
would you describe what the town faces if we don't unload it?
well, it's a money pit. We face a money pit. I mean, just to remove, so okay, people get hung up on them wanting money from the CPC, which is very typical, that you trade that they have to the community has to show the company, because the financing for these things is phenomenally complicated,
Yeah. Yeah.
for these developers to get financing. They're going to a myriad of different agencies and groups, and so one of the things that they look for is the host community, into having this project happen. And one of the ways that you do that is you maybe either give that community, you trade the community a historic preservation thing, which is what they do with Cody School. Like, the lockers are still in the hallways of that building.
No kidding.
The historic, yeah, preservation thing, as
Yeah.
well as, so in this case, if you look at the cost of so if the town didn't sell that building, and we had to, at least, at the very least, we had to tear down those newer parts of the building, which really do have to go. I mean, it's costing over $200,000 a year now just to own it, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that the roof doesn't leak, that the
Yeah.
systems stay working. And so, the cost of tearing down, just getting the site prepped, is much, much more than what they're asking for us from CPC money
Yeah.
alone. And we're going to end up with affordable housing. And, I just hope people don't get hung up on that transactional thing of this for that, because
Yeah.
the big payoff, of course, is going to be that affordable housing for seniors, which we really need.
Yeah.
If a couple is trying to live on Social Security and maybe a little bit more than that, and they have a house to sell and they want to go into an apartment and stay on Cape Cod, I mean, I think they're talking about like $800 a month apartment, something like that. That's unheard of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
anywhere on the
Do,
Cape. So
do you, I don't expect you to know this, but do you by chance know what our 40B um, amount or level is right now against the
way low, way
really?
low. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're one of the. I believe, I may be misspeaking, but it's my understanding we are one of those communities with the least amount of affordable housing. That you're supposed to have 10%, I think it is, affordable housing stock,
Yeah.
and we come in way under that.
So why is that?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things I attended was a workshop that the Housing Authority puts on. In fact, they'll probably be coming around again. The downside was it was like 6 or 8 nights, and once a week, and that's sort of a big commitment. I don't think I made them all, but why is it's a lot of different reasons. One of them was changing from the model that you didn't mix commercial and residential together, the way that, like, if you look at downtown Falmouth, you have, the stores and then 2 floors of apartment
Yeah.
buildings. That was very common. It's somewhere along the line, in like the 70s, where it became this thing where, no, we have to separate the commercial from the residential, build malls, build strip malls, put all of that in one spot, and then put all of our residential stuff in another. So that was a part of it. And then Proposition 2.5, believe it or not, also had a big part to do with it, because if a town is going to only be able to raise taxes on a house 2.5% a year without an override, do you want a $150,000 house to tax, or do you want a $500,000 house to tax?
Right.
And
Right.
if you're going to get the $500,000 house, chances are, if you go to 1 acre zoning, for example, those people who can afford to buy a full acre of land are also going to be able to afford to buy, build a big expensive house.
Right.
So those kinds of things, not necessarily sense, but there were, it's really like an incredible ripple effect that created a lot of problems for, really just short-sightedness
Yeah.
that created the lack of affordable housing.
Let's talk a little bit about historic preservation. I find that some say Sandwich is pretty bullish about historic preservation. I'm not so sure. And I think when I look at the demolition by neglect, the houses that are just falling apart, it appears, and I don't have fact, it just appears as if we kind of pick and choose what Sandwich wants to invest its energy in as it relates to historic
Right.
preservation. Am I off? Am I
Yeah, I think you're a little bit off.
okay? No,
I
I
think,
want to know. Tell me.
well, I think that one of the things that's nice is that, in my opinion, I think we strive for historic preservation.
Agreed.
Everybody gives it lip service. I don't think you'll read a single mission statement from whether it's the SCIC, the Board of, the Chamber of Commerce. Everybody sort of unanimously sees the value of historic preservation. Um, and, I don't think that that necessarily means that you don't have any growth, that you don't have any change. I think that, in my opinion, having been a small businessman here since 1982, I think that historic preservation is economic preservation in Sandwich. That's my little byline, buzzword,
Explain that.
because it really is. Well, what is our economic engine here? Up until COVID-19, at any rate, it
Yeah.
was tourism. It was, and it wasn't just tourists coming for a week stay in the summer, or at a cottage on the beach, but it's also a lot of day trippers. We
Mm.
see a lot of destination diners who are coming to Sandwich specifically to go for a walk on the boardwalk and then find a place to eat lunch, go up to heritage museums and gardens and then find a place for lunch.
Yeah.
Or maybe just come to us because they like us, and we're there. We get loads of people, for example, who live in Pine Hills. But there's an attraction for those visitors here, and they are the kind of visitors that are not looking for outlet malls. They're not looking for casinos. They are looking for, they're called the cultural heritage visitor. I served on the visitor services board for 10 years and attended a lot of summits for the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, and learned that there are different types of tourists, different who, and we get what's called the cultural heritage visitor. They want to see the antique charm, the historic character. So, one of the points, going to what you're talking about with demolition by neglect, I mean, it is a shame that, for example, there's a house at the bottom of Gully Lane that was Aunt Sally's house. And Thorne Burgess wrote a wonderful book called On Sally's Friends in Fur.
I did a house detective show on that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, for example, was, if you read that book, it was very charming. The woman
Yeah.
lived there. She had a woodshed in the back, and
Yeah.
would have wild animals eat off her lap with day-old baked goods that she'd get at the local bakery. But that house has just been left to rack and ruin. I was also on the board of the Thornton Burgess Society, and we did everything we could to plead with the owner. What's your plan? Please don't let this house fall down. But in the end, Greg, it also becomes a matter of personal property, and that's where on the planning board you run into more, I think. More butting of heads than anything is the notion that, why should you tell me what I can or cannot do with my personal property,
Right.
in my yard, on my property,
Right.
and that becomes really, I think, one of a big, I don't know how I would describe it, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things that, you cross swords about
Yeah.
more than anything else.
The boathouse is a
Right.
perfect example.
The woman
Privately owned.
right. And all of those neighbors, trust me, have, approached Mr. Flynn about, please do something with this boathouse. If you're not going to do it, please sell it, and, but nobody can make Mr. Flynn do something
He
with
doesn't want to do.
his private property.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I suppose, if you could raise enough money to, I don't know whether that's the issue, if would sell it but wants too much money for it, or, but that's, something. How does the town step in and take control of somebody's private property?
Yeah.
It's just
And there are some homes, when I started the house detectives, we got a lot of backlash. People thought we were coming after people that just don't invest in their home and they don't have the money to do that,
right.
which is not the case. It's really the abandoned Aunt
Yeah.
Sally's house.
Right.
It's the ones that have holes in the side and they're not safe.
Right.
Um,
Well, unfortunately, that's what ends up allowing them to be demolished. On the north side, you have a little bit, because there's a little bit of a wait and see period, see if there's another option that can be had, at least in the historic district. And there was an attempt to my friend Kate McGuire, when she was on the historic district committee board, they tried to craft something for the other side of town,
yeah,
because a beautiful old house that I guess was torn down. But what ends up happening is that they get to be in such poor condition that then the building inspector will say it's not safe for you to go in and restore that building.
right, right,
And
right.
then and then how do you argue with that in
Yeah,
terms of saying, well, now it has to be demolished?
right.
Um, but recently there was a little house over in Jarvisville that a couple of people stepped up and from the historic district board and are renovating, and so we'll
Right.
see how that goes. But yeah, it's sometimes they're in such dire condition that literally, unless you want to dismantle it all piece by piece and then put it back together again,
Yeah.
there's no way to go in and get it fixed up.
We got a couple more minutes, Bob, but I want to ask you, wastewater development. That
Mm.
seems to be the
Oh yeah.
shiny object. No, it's like herding cats. It's really hard to nail that down. What's your take on it? And over the next 3 years, if you were back on the board, is there an effort that you might be putting towards that? What might it be?
Well, there is. We made an effort as a town by electing to take 1% of the CPA monies
Yeah.
to start set aside. Also, the bed and breakfast, if they ever, the Airbnbs, if they ever get operational. So there is, the town is starting a little savings account for that, so that if and when it gets to the tipping point and we must do something about it, we'll at least have prepared in some way. Um, it's inevitable given the fragility of our natural environment here. Our sole source of water is an aquifer that everything you put into the ground seeps down and through and into that aquifer. That's essentially why the so-called golden triangle
Right.
and the large parcels of commercial real estate in South Sandwich that are not developed have not been developed, because they really are sitting on what's called the recharge zone of water that has to go back into the aquifer. So that can't happen without, whether it's a private investor saying, well, I've got enough plan for this tract of land that I'm willing to make that investment, and that's doubtful.
Yeah.
So I think that there's Sarah, who sat on the board with me. She was on the wastewater board, looking at options. And I think Sandwich is in better, from what little I know. I think we're in a better position. We're not going to be there are groups that really monitor this stuff and pressure towns to do something about it, maybe more quickly than they want to. And I think that some of the stuff that would trigger that is not the case for Sandwich. So
Yeah.
that's good.
We are in this pandemic, and I know we touched on it a little bit, and I really appreciate you telling me what's been going on at the Chew as it relates to this social isolation and how it impacted your business with Tobin. But looking at it as a member of our community, and again, I'm pulling on the fact that you are very involved. You are there in this community and involved. Talk from the heart a little bit. What is this pandemic, the social isolation? What has it done, and what do you think your fears are going forward in the unknown?
Yeah. Well, I count myself very lucky, that financially, I haven't been ruined by this. I mean, I had some savings that I did definitely have to access right away. And we did get the PPP funding for these 8 weeks that we're in now, which I think was essential. Um, So, I know that there are devastating stories, though, of people who, are really economically devastated by what's going on. And in fact, I gave a donation to the food bank today because,
Right.
I just watched a program about, just food scarcity in
Yeah.
people's lives. And, it's pretty bad when you don't have enough money to eat. So, yeah, I mean, there's that side of it, but there's also, I think, there's also a good like I think try to think of, well, what are the good things? I mean, I can't imagine that families don't find themselves feeling maybe a little more tighter knit than they were before.
Yeah.
Maybe, I know when I was a kid, we sat down at the dinner table at the same time in the same places every single night. And I don't know how much of that was going on or
Yeah.
has gone on. It's my understanding, not a whole lot. And so
Right.
maybe with this, there's always a silver lining. I think that maybe there's some really lovely stories out there too about people becoming closer, or you know uh, growing a bigger heart and caring for that elderly neighbor who
Yeah.
they maybe only knew their name or to wave to, and now they're more involved in their life. So there's probably a lot of really nice stories as well. I think for me, I think I'm a big believer in the mask. I think that, people have to understand that this is about the transmission of your saliva or mucus onto a surface that somebody touches or into somebody's eyes, mouth or nose. And if I'm keeping mine in my body and you're keeping yours in your body, we don't have to be as scared.
Right.
I think that I see this thing where it's like, if we're passing one another in the grocery store when we both have masks on and we're not speaking,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's no reason to be fearful.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm a
There are
big
those
proponent
people
of,
though that think this is all hype.
yeah, well, so there's 70,000 people are dead. That's not hype.
That's not hype. I'm
You
totally
know,
with you.
I think that a lot of people think that it's an extreme, and and it's really people maybe a little bit like us, who I wouldn't call us rural, but we are less urban than a lot of areas. So I can understand where you could say, well, why should this area, sort of conform in the same way to that super urban area that really has to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and but you just don't know. I mean, how do you know that if we hadn't done that weeks ago, we wouldn't be in the same position as those urban
Yeah.
areas? Because that's the other thing when the argument they make about it being like the flu. It's not anything like the flu in terms of its contagiousness.
Right. Right.
It's far, far more contagious. So,
Uh, I want to get a couple of your final thoughts as we wrap up. Yes or no? Lights on the boardwalk?
off the top of my head, I would have to say probably no, but I don't know why. I don't know what they'll look like. I don't know where they're going. I really don't know anything. I mean, off the top of my head, I think, ooh, and for several reasons. One is, the just sort of the uh, I don't know, ugliness of, night lighting when you're trying to maybe look up at stars or you're looking at this beautiful little spot. But I also would worry more about seeing more people down there doing things like, let's jump off at night, because now there's some lighting and we can, at least see if the tide is high or not, or,
Yeah.
or I
Whatever.
don't know. I just think that could, on the other hand, invite a lot of more mischief,
Yeah.
on the boardwalk at night. And you wouldn't want people diving and jumping off the boardwalk at nighttime, I don't think, because if there ever was an emergency,
Have you
oh
ever jumped off the boardwalk?
yeah, of course. Yes, I jump off every summer.
See, I'm a loser. I haven't done it once.
Really?
I've been
Okay.
in town
Yeah.
about
It's
five
almost like
years.
a rite of passage. At least once a summer, you have to.
I'm
And then floating out with floating out with the current or floating in with the current, whichever the case might be, is also a wonderful thing to do in the summertime, at least once.
Let me ask you this to wrap up. Give me your elevator pitch. Why should people put your name or circle your name when they go to the ballot?
Well, I'm a known quantity. I guess, I've been at it for 6 years. If you haven't heard anybody, they're not coming with pitchforks and, tar. So I guess I've done okay. Um, and, I think that I have my, it does take a little bit of time to get your head wrapped around the whole process.
Yeah.
And I do think that I've gotten to that point. which is good. And I think that you need that. You need that on the board so that, there's sort of somebody that has that. If you've ever served on any board, I think there has to be some continuity, or else you end up making the same mistakes over again that you've
Yes.
already tried, and nobody knows it because nobody was there to know, oh, that's already been tried and here's
Yeah.
where it went or didn't go. So from that point of view, I think that, I think I'm fair. I try to be user friendly. I think that if somebody's gotten to the point where they have, gotten they're an agenda item on our meeting, chances are that, there's a good chance you can say yes. And I think I, try to do that. Let's see why you can't, as opposed to, coming in saying, oh, and I think a lot of people come to a meeting, they feel that kind of intimidation, like they want to, they don't want to help me. They don't want to,
Yeah.
they want to say no.
Right.
And,
Right.
and I try to look at it from like, what can we do to say yes to these people, unless they're really coming in from left field and not,
Yeah.
following the rules and the regulations, then,
Yeah.
um, I'm a,
Well, Bob, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. It is always a pleasure, whether it's at the
thank you.
supermarket or town hall.
Yep.
Thank you for your service, being a member of
You're
this
welcome.
community.
Another big thing that's on the horizon that people should know about and keep their ears peeled for is we were just about to put together a committee to update the local comprehensive plan in town, which is, is sort of the big master plan that we go by, and we'll be working with the Cape Cod Commission. So there's going to be a 9-member panel of people who are going to collect and, digest that information, put together a report with the help of the Cape Cod Commission, and that will ultimately come to town meeting for a vote as well. So
Wonderful.
that's something that people are going to want to definitely sort of stay tuned for.
Well, you just made the ask for people to consider another way to be involved in the community. All right, I have not had one of your chocolate
Oh my God, you haven't lived.
brownie bombs. I got to come by and have one. My wife loves anything chocolate. So thank you so much, Bob.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and again, folks, you will be able to find Bob on the ballot May 19th.
Yes. Yep. I think most people have already maybe mailed them in. This might
I know. Well, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Well, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.